Hey, boys and girls, it's Dave Duford here at Final Expense Agent Mentor, where I help agents like you succeed in selling life insurance and insurance in general. In today's special interview, I'm interviewing Claude Whitacre. I've done an interview with him in the past, would highly suggest if you haven't listened to that interview on referral generation, definitely do so. A little bit about Claude before we get started. Claude sold in customers' homes for over 35 years and is a sales speaker and the author of 6 books on selling. And today we're going to be talking specifically about the sales presentation process. A lot of this material is covered in his book, One Call Close. And Claude, let's jump right into it. Hope you're doing all right today.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's cover the first question here in the list, which is always a good question to start with. A lot of people think salesmen are born, not made. So I have to ask you, were you always good at selling?
No. In fact, I was incredibly shy when I was in high school. I was a nerdy high school kid that never had a date. I never went to a dance. I never went to a sporting event. I was so shy, I didn't even attend my own graduation. That's how shy I was. And so naturally, I chose sales, door-to-door sales as my career. And the way that happened, the first couple of years I was selling was selling life insurance. And you're pretty young. You probably don't remember this. Remember the Mutual of Omaha show, Wild Kingdom?
All the old people tell me about it. Yeah.
All the old people, yes, where they talk about all the old people. You know, at funerals. You hear about this at funerals. Well, I was watching Mutual of Omaha, Wild Kingdom, and I always liked that show when I was a kid. And I decided, boy, that's just so neat, And in my little town that I grew up in, Lodi, Ohio, I think 6,000 people and all very blue collar and all that. There was one guy in town that wore a suit. One guy. He wore a suit and a business hat and drove a nice car. And I was fascinated by that guy. And what I found out was he was an agent for Mutual of Omaha. And I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to wear a suit and I wanted to drive a car and wear a hat. And I wanted to be a businessman because he was the closest thing I ever saw to, a real businessman that wore a suit. And I went to Mutual of Omaha and I just turned 21, which, means I'm able to be an agent now. And I went to Mutual of Omaha and I did not impress him. And he said, no, shattered my dreams. So I said, no, I'll just go someplace else. So I went to Monumental Life, which is a debit company. I don't know if they're even still in business, frankly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're still around.
Oh, okay, good. So I went there to their office and they hired me. And the only thing I had going for me, I had no skills. I had no aptitude. All I knew was this, because I came from a very blue-collar family. I knew that 8 hours a day is what you put in, okay? Because before that, I had a few jobs in shops and, working in woodworking shops and stuff like that. So I just put in 8 hours. And so all I knew was this, knocking on doors. I had no clue what I was doing. So all I knew was 8 hours a day knocking on doors. And just doing that, within a few months, I was the top guy in the office, which sounds better than it was. It wasn't there wasn't a lot of heavy hitters there. But the first full calendar year I was with the company, I was the 3rd top salesman in the company. Okay. The first full calendar year that I was with them. And so that's something. And it wasn't because I was brilliant and it wasn't because I was so great or I had intuition or secrets or anything like that. I just worked 8 hours a day. See, because I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And that was really, what I did. And then for the next several decades, I just studied selling. And I did something that almost nobody does. I would keep notes of every presentation. And I did that for, at least the first 20 years. I would keep notes of every presentation, what worked, what didn't work. If they didn't buy, I would try to work out why they didn't buy. What did I do wrong that, I could have improved? If they did buy, or if I said something, occasionally I'd say something brilliant, and then I would remember it and I'd write that down and I'd think, okay, they asked me this question and how would I handle that in the future? And I would memorize the answers. And I really worked on the craft. See, the craft of selling. I know you do that too. I know that you're
Sure.
I watch your videos and I can tell that you're really into the craft of selling. So that's really what it was. It was all self-taught. Occasionally I would read a book, you know, like with Ben Feldman, I'd read Ben Feldman's books. And I didn't have any mentors at the time. Eventually I had some mentors, but not in that business. And that it just went from there. You know, I just eventually I was in, and it was all in-home sales. Eventually I was in 12,000 homes, and 7,200 people gave me money. So it worked out okay.
Right. And of course, one question kind of to follow up with the length of experience you've had with selling in homes, you know, insurance and then vacuums later on.
Sure.
What do you think the biggest myth is in closing sales with all your experience?
Oh man, the myth in closing sales, there's two. The biggest myth in sales, I think, is when people are brand new and they're starting out, the myth is that people don't buy. And that's just not true. They're afraid that nobody's going to buy from them. And that's so not true. I mean, in fact, most people, anybody, you know, they spend their entire life buying stuff. I mean, you know, they go on shopping sprees. If you take, you know, the average person's income that they make, you know, what percentage of that income do you think they spend every month? An average of about 100%. 100%. So 105%. So they're going to spend it 105%. If they have it, they're going to spend it. See, because that's what we do. And if we can't think of anything to spend it on, we go to Las Vegas and give it away. You know,
burns a hole in our pockets. What do you expect?
There's a hole in our pockets. We got to spend it. So, in fact, that's why there's even a name for those people. They're called consumers. Okay. Right. So people love buying. It's cathartic. It gives them an endorphin rush. You know, people love the process of buying. They might not like the process of being sold, but they love the process of buying. And if you can give them that experience of them buying rather than you selling, that's a huge key. The other myth in closing sales, and I've read this before in so many books, is that it's either 5 or 7. I don't know where these numbers come from, but it's either, you know, the average sale takes place after 5 closing attempts or 7 closing attempts, or you have to see the person 7 times, or you have to 7 closing attempts, or the person has to see an ad 7 times before they'll respond. I mean, it applies to almost anything having to do with sales or marketing. And these things, I don't know I do know where this came from. Do you want me to tell you real quick?
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I've read that years and years, and I thought, this is the stupidest thing. And where does it even come from? Where's the basis in that?
Here's where it came from originally. In the 1950s, because I'm a student, and I just found it in an old marketing book. This is for advertising. There was a focus group in the 1950s, and they tested to find out with a focus group, how many times did a person have to hear the brand name before they would remember it. And it was either 5 or 7 times. I don't remember, but that was the whole thing. So the advertising guy wrote a paper on it, and he said that for, you know, the average person has to hear your brand name, you know, let's say 7 times before they'll remember your brand name. That's not before they'll buy.
Right.
You know, just before they remember the brand name. And that somehow got picked up in every marketing book, and that translated into sales books and advertising books, and it became the gospel. And it's just not true. I mean, when I am doing speaking, sometimes I'll ask the audience if there's a lot of them. Let's say there's 500 people in the audience. I'll say, I want everybody to think about this. Think of the last expensive, really nice thing that you bought. Okay? Everybody got that in their mind? Yeah. How many and you bought it from a salesman. You got that? And usually it's a car or something like that.
Sure.
How many closes did it take before you said yes? And I say, how many here is either 1 or none? And almost everybody raises their hand.
Right, yeah.
See, it doesn't take 7 or 8 or 9 closes to make a sale. Now, you can. I mean, there is that method of selling. I call it the old method of selling. You know, right. Just close and close and close and close, pitch and close. But really, you can get if you're doing everything right, most of your sales will happen at the end. They'll just say yes, or they'll ask one question maybe a token objection, and then, then they'll buy. And now, I mean, just because I've been doing this for so long, and I know you've been doing it for a long time too, at the end of the presentation pretty much whether they're going to buy or not. And after they give you an objection and you handle it, you pretty well know that that's either, maybe you have to take another few minutes or however long it's going to take, or that there's no sale there. And eventually you just recognize that. And that's a good thing to know.
So why don't you expand what you talk about in your book, One Call Closing? You talk about the customer's buying process. We kind of hinted at that, right, when we're talking about closing and how many attempts it takes.
Sure.
Can you kind of describe on that further, please?
Sure. Well, there's there's a selling process, AIDA, I think it's called, attention, interest, desire, action. Well, you've heard of that, right?
Glengarry Glen Ross.
Glengarry, that's exactly right.
Right.
Well, that's not where I first heard of it, but it's in there because I'm a big fan of that show or that movie. There's also a buying process, and everybody goes through this. They might go through it at a different speed. Here's the steps. I call it coming into focus. That means that they become aware that they're interested in something. Then they gather information about what they're interested in. Then they shop, and then they, after they're shopping, they're rationalizing their choice, and then they're defending their purchase. And here's what that means. Coming into focus, when you're sending out cards, and then people are sending them in for information, that first step is probably already over with. Coming into focus,
right.
They see the card, and then they're gathering information. Gathering information can take anywhere from a minute. It happens, but it can take anywhere from a minute to a year. It just depends on how that person shops and how that person does research. They can go online for forever and try to check out every single possible company that is in existence, or they can take just a few minutes to ask you a couple of questions. And to them, whatever they feel is gathering information, that's what it is to them. Some people can do it in just a minute. In fact, some people, when they're sending in the card, they think that's gathering information.
Right.
Okay, so they might already be over that step. And then shopping is where they're considering alternatives. See, should I do this or should I do that? Or should I do this or should I wait? And then rationalizing the choice, that's when once unconsciously they've decided that they want to buy. What they'll do is they'll start saying things that indicate that they're interested in that specific program or that specific product. And they will, and essentially if it's a couple especially, what they're doing is they're selling each other on the idea that they want to buy, is what that is. And then that process, again, can take anywhere from just a few minutes to, usually it's not very fast. It's not very slow. It's 15 minutes, maybe tops. That happens pretty quick. And then once they've decided, to buy and they've signed the paperwork and given you some money, then they have to defend, purchasing. They rationalize why they did it. See, to make themselves feel good about that decision. See, then everybody goes through that process, but they can do that either. You can accomplish a lot of that just by your advertising or just by sending out the cards. When they're contacting you, that dynamic is way different from if you contact them. See, if they contact you, it's way, way, way different than it's much better if they contact you. See.
So how do you compile all this process of investigation to rationalizing and defending the purchase? How do you compile that into what we call a one-call close? How do you actually do that?
Well, see, if you're selling insurance, see, I do it. I sell mostly by speaking, but you're sending in cards. You want to give them as much information. To me, I want them to have a lot of information before I actually start presenting them with a specific recommendation. So, for example, coming into focus is maybe where they mailed, in the card. They mailed in the card. Now you know that they're interested. They raised their hand and said, "Yeah, I'd like to know more about this." Okay, now they're going to gather information. A lot of times, what that means is, see, they don't know maybe how to shop for what you sell. So they don't know if that means, should they check out every company? Should they check out 2 or 3 programs? Should they talk to friends? Should they, should they listen to infomercials on TV? They just don't know how to do that. So one of the things that I would always suggest is when you're in that person's home is show them, and I've always done this, I've shown them two options. Okay. Now those options, especially if you're talking to people that are older, those options should be very similar. You don't want to show them a car and a helicopter, because now you have to explain all about cars and all about helicopters. You don't want to do that. So you want to explain about, here's this car. I'm just using cars as an example. Here's this car, and 99% of everything is the same, except this has two options that the other one does not have. So really it's just one presentation, but you're showing them two options. And then that gives them the feeling that they're shopping. A lot of times that gives them the feeling that they're shopping just by doing that. And there's other ways of doing. There's a couple of other ways of doing that. What was I going to say here? I'm sorry, I apologize. I lost my.
No, you're fine.
Shopping. Okay, shopping. What I like to do is at the beginning of when I'm talking to them. What I like to do is, show them two offers, but I like to say this, okay, and I changed this just a little bit. This is why I had to write this down, because you sell insurance and I sell something else. So I want to change, what I sell to what you sell. So this is essentially what I say at the beginning. I say, there are several different programs out there. I can get any of them for you if you like. May I ask you a few questions to make sure we're talking about the best one for you? And then I start qualifying. That gives them the feeling that you're shopping for them. See, you can be their source. You're their buyer. You're their assistant buyer. See, it's like you have a shopping service and you can get anything you want. So when you're asking them qualifying questions about, what their interests are and what they need the money for, and what they already know about insurance and what their philosophy is, and all that, and why they, contact you in the first place. When you get those answers, you'll be able to know, what to recommend. And your recommendation will mean a lot to them, because they think, well, he's aware of every product that's out there.
Right. And
he's showing me the one that I should get. So that feeling of shopping is pretty well satisfied from them, with them. And then rationalizing the choice, that's when they start. If you have two choices, and if you want to make them very similarly priced too. You don't want one to be $30 a month and one to be $80 a month. You don't want that, okay? Because that's too much. There's too much of a difference. You want them to be pretty close, so that they'll start indicating which one they're more interested in, and they'll start saying things like, "Well, this one, I kind of like that extra feature of." If we're disabled, it pays, or if, we can increase it later if we want to, or, whatever options that there might be an option one program has, or I like the idea of being covered right now rather than waiting 2 years, or whatever it is. And whatever it is they start going towards, that's what you support.
Right.
See? Because you want a sale. You don't, I'm not that excited. I don't really care that much whether they're going to give me, $50 a month or $55 a month. What I care about is they're going to give me 50 or 55. I care about the sale, because if I don't have a sale, that's the end of that relationship. See, so I want them to buy something. So whatever they are going towards naturally, then I'm going to support that decision. And a lot of times it's the less expensive thing. Okay. Right. But that's what I do.
I'm kind of interested to get your perspective on this. We may be jumping ahead, because for my audience, that's okay. We're going to break down this process in more detail throughout this conversation. But you mentioned the options that you show. Is this something in which there's a reason you show two, or are you opposed to showing, say, 3 or 4? What's your kind of perspective on?
Well, okay, that's a very, very that's a good question. You want to keep it to 2. You want to ask them questions to funnel it down to 2. See, here's why. For example, in our business, I sell vacuum cleaners. Right now, I sell them in the store. Here's what happens. And customers are customers are customers. They're all the same people. People who buy insurance also buy vacuum cleaners. So we're talking to exactly the same audience. All right. Here's what happens. If I ask them a bunch of questions, to find out, in their mind, I'm asking them qualifying questions like a doctor asks questions, how do you feel and things like that. And partially that's true. But a lot of the reason I'm asking is I want to know what product to go to. What price range should I go to? What type of product should I go? What options should I show them? And then I'll go to two vacuum cleaners. And then I'll go between those two and I'll show them, I'll really show them the more expensive one because it has a few more options that the other one does not have. And then I'll say, this is the difference in price and this, what do you think? And by that time, they feel like, since I've asked them those qualifying questions, they feel like they've shopped. Okay, they feel like I'm narrowing this down now. See, and here's the problem: if they start asking about other vacuum cleaners, if by the time I'm to the fourth option, I've lost them,
right?
Because now they're back. They've backpedaled. Now they're gathering information, and this is what happens. I call it a shopping spree. They're going to do a shopping spree where they start walking around the store and asking questions about everything. And absolutely, I know for a fact they're not going to buy. In fact, they can't because their head is full of options, and everything is just swirling around in their head, and they can't buy. And if you're especially dealing with older people, keep it simple. That's why these options have to be very similar. You don't want to show them two completely different things. You're not showing them, like I've got one policy for income replacement, and I've got another one that's life insurance. You don't want to do that,
right?
See, because that confuses them. So you want it to be very, very similar, and just whatever one they start going towards, then that's the one that I start supporting them in that decision. And if it's the one that's less expensive, if it's the one that's more expensive, I'll say, what I hear from a lot of customers is for only $5 more, a month, you're going to get this and this and this and this. A lot of people tell me that, that's what they want. It's a very popular machine. It's our most popular. I might even say it's our most popular machine if that's true. I'll say it's our most popular machine. And popular is a really good word because now they want it. Now they feel safe. See, well, if 1,000 other people have bought it, it must be the right thing to buy. So they feel safe. Popular is a really smart word to use. And then I might say, may I make a recommendation? Well, now they're like, oh, thank you. What would you recommend? Well, if they're looking for at the one that's slightly more money, I'll support that. Okay, then because they just want to feel good about buying that. If they're looking at the one that's a little bit less expensive, I'll say, you know what? I got to tell you, in your specific situation, it's not for everybody, but in your specific situation, I think this is a better value for you. I just don't think you're going to use those other options. I think that this is really the one that's, a better fit for you. And the great thing is it's the lesser expensive option. And it's really hard for them to say no to that. It's really hard for them to say no. Almost always they'll say, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and do that.
So let's go back to qualifying, because obviously getting to that point in the sale is the goal. But how do you identify and narrow down the options so there are two through the qualification process?
Well, I don't sell insurance. I don't sell life insurance right now. So it's I'm going to have to change. I'm going to have to try to change these questions a little bit.
Oh yeah.
The most important thing that I want to know. I want to know why they sent in the card, and the way you asked that is very elegant. I saw that on one of your YouTube videos, and the 21 questions.
Right. Yeah.
Remember that? I wrote that down. The first question I said, "Oh, that's a good one." What is it that you were? What was your concern when you were sending in this card? What was on your mind? And because that changes the dynamic of the entire presentation. It changes the dynamic of the entire relationship. Now you're asking them questions. It's like a doctor. You're asking them questions because you're concerned. See? So you ask them questions. You might ask. I call them discovery questions and commitment questions. So discovery questions are just, roughly how old are you? Are you married? What kind of work do you do? A few questions like that. Okay, then I want to know other things. And the most important question that I want to know, which dramatically influences how they buy, is I want to know let's say I'm selling insurance. I want to know what they already have. I want to know how they bought it. more than what they already have. I want to know that too, but I want to know how they bought it. Did somebody come to their home? Did they buy it from a friend? Was it, did they, see an infomercial on TV? What was it that prompted them to buy? What was it that appealed to them about that? What was their experience? And I want to know about the salesman. What was their experience with the salesman? And the reason I want to know those things, and when I was selling insurance, I'd always want to know that, especially if they bought, a vacuum cleaner in somebody's home. If they bought it in their home, I wanted to know about that experience. And the reason I wanted to know if there was anything about the guy they hated. Okay, because I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
See, if there's something that we liked because he was this and this and this, or we liked the product because it was this and this and this, and he showed us this feature and we like this, and okay, or I would never buy from a guy like that again. He's the worst kind of pressury guy, and I want to know those things. I want to hear their story about that experience. For lots of reasons. One of them is if they're upset about something, even if they bought from the guy, I want to make sure that that they know that I'm with them against this guy.
Right.
I'll always say, well, what happened? Oh man, I don't know if I'd have handled it as well as you. I'd be pretty mad. I mean, you handled it a lot better than I would. I'm really sorry that you had to go through that experience. I'm always on their side no matter what it is. It's us against them, against that one bad apple in an otherwise pristine, business. I want to hear their stories, and then I'll start, asking some questions about that I should know about to show them what policy I'm going to show them. And then I'll say, may I make a recommendation? And they say, yeah, okay, well, here's two that I think, based on what you've been telling me, I have two choices out of all the ones that are available, because I can get anything that's available, I can get it for you. The two that I would recommend are this one, and they're surprisingly similar. And, let me show you the features, and then you tell me what you think. And they say, okay. And I show them the features, see. Or the benefits. It's the same thing.
Sure.
When I'm talking about benefits, it's why I say features, I'm really talking about benefits. And then, which one in your situation, which one do you think would be the best way to go? And then in my close, it's amazing how, at the end of it, I just say this, and this is a good thing for your listeners to get. Usually it's a couple. Is that what you're selling is a couple?
I'd say about 50-50. We'll get the widows and the widowers and then occasionally couples. So we'll see kind of both. Okay.
Well, if it's a couple, I like couples more, although, the single people or widows or widowers, they buy exactly there's no difference in the percentage of them that buy.
Right.
They're not more qualified if they're married. But if they're married, I'll just say, is that okay with you? And and I just say it like I'm asking them what time it is. Does this based on what you're telling me, this is the one I'd recommend. Is that okay with you? And they go, yeah. Or if it's a couple, I'll say, is this okay with you? And I'll usually ask the guy first. See,
right? I'll
ask the guy first, and I'll look at the wife, and I'll say, is it okay with you too?
Right.
And the reason I ask that question is this: I want both of them to hear the other one say okay. I want the wife to hear the husband say that he wants it. I want the husband to hear the wife say that they want it, because that will sort of dampen the idea that they have to talk about it, because they've just both said that they're okay with it.
That's good.
And then I assume strongly that means okay. And then I'll just start saying, okay, great. Let's see, in my store, I say, great, let's go over here and I'll put one together for you. Or I'll say, if I was selling insurance, I'd say, great. Okay. Now I just need to ask you a few questions, and I pull out the form and I just start doing that.
So let's go back to the beginning of the sales call. We've talked about qualifying, and this is an interesting topic I bring up with my agents is the importance of rapport or lack thereof. My
Absolutely.
opinion, has changed dramatically over the years. How do you feel important? How important is rapport?
Well,
implement it in your sales call?
Let's talk about when I say rapport. When I'm talking about rapport, we've all heard the old way of selling. The guy comes into your house and he sees, that you've got 4 moose heads on the wall, and he wants to, and then the salesman starts talking about moose heads and how he went hunting, and you start comparing notes about fishing and fly fishing and hunting and that. Okay, that now you can do that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with if you're really interested in hunting animals and cutting off their heads and putting them on the wall for everybody to see. If that's an interest of yours, that's, fine. You can talk about that for a minute, but when I say rapport, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about rapport like a doctor has rapport for you. Okay. I want them to think of me as an advice giver. See, not as a pitchman. The old way of selling is you go in and you pitch. You just talk and talk and talk about what you've got. At the end, they give you an objection, and you answer objections until they either throw you out or acquiesce. And they're all sweaty and beaten and broken, and you're all sweaty and beaten and broken, and that's the old way of selling. Say, well, you don't need to do that. So you're a professional. They contacted you. They want information. You're an information provider. You're there to help them. That's why in insurance they're called clients and not customers.
Right.
They're clients because you're there to help them.
You're an advisor.
See? So you're an advisor. And when you ask questions, what develops rapport is the 2 most important things. Okay, is listening to the answers, actively listening, asking a question, and actively listening. Because especially if these are older people, and it's true with everybody, but it's especially true with older people, maybe nobody has asked them their opinion on anything for a year.
That's true. So true.
Maybe nobody has listened to them for a year. You are the guy that's listening. And when you're listening to somebody, when you ask them a question, first of all, if you ask their opinion on something, what do you think of this? How would you do this? What do you like about this? If you're asking their opinion, that is a huge compliment to that person.
That's true.
See?
Right.
And then listening to their answer, that's a huge compliment. You almost can't do them a greater favor than to listen to what they're saying. And you really should be interested in what they're saying. Of course, a lot of it is because you want them to buy. Of course, there's an agenda and all of that stuff. But you have to also be interested in what they're saying. Genuinely interested, because if you're not, they can tell. See? Maybe not right away, but they can. A lot of people, women are better at that than men. Women are better at being able to tell if you're sincere or insincere. I found that out from being married forever, but and selling people's homes forever. Women are better at it than men. But you have to listen to their answers. It makes you look professional and caring. Asking questions is a compliment, like I said. Listening means you respect them and what they have to say. It's the most important thing. That develops rapport. Asking questions, asking their opinion, listening to what they say. You don't have to be like, if they're hunting. Here's a good example. I'm not a hunter. Okay, nothing wrong with it. I don't think badly about people that hunt. It's just not my thing. All right. So I go into a home and this guy's a hunter, and he wants to talk about hunting. Now, the thing I'm not going to do that every new guy does, he starts talking about hunting. He starts talking about, if I'm a fly fisherman. Oh, yeah, fly fishing. Oh, that's the greatest thing in the world. And he's never been fly fishing. He doesn't know anything about it. He's got no interest in fly fishing. And what happens is the guy finds that out. The guy can tell you're a phony because he knows a lot about fly fishing, and he'll be able to tell very quickly that you don't know anything about it. So if the guy's a hunter and I'm not a hunter, I might say this, this is true. I'll say, my dad was a hunter. All my uncles were hunting. When I was a little kid, he took me hunting. And you know what I loved mostly about that? I got to spend quality time with my dad doing and seeing him do something he really, really enjoyed. So now I changed it from hunting to relationship with my dad. See, right. And who cannot relate to that? That's true. See, everybody relates to that. So just change. I almost like to say this: if they come up with if they have an objection, you don't like the objection, change the objection. Well, right. If they have a story, they want to tell you a story, and you don't really identify with it, change the focus of the story on something you can identify with, that's universal, that you can both, identify with. So you don't ever try to fake it. Don't fake it till you make it. That's all wrong. That's wrong. Right. So you just be yourself. See.
And it's so true too, because I think if you think about it, you're starting the sales call with an act of insincerity. And if you start a sales call like that, and like you said, they pick up on it, they don't trust you, and you don't want to start that way. You certainly don't want to end that way either, but
Right.
there's always a good, sincere way, even if you don't have direct experience, like you said, that you can relate it to somehow, or even just show sincere interest, and, that will connect, because that's the whole point.
Yeah. Always try to see it from their point of view. Also, the other thing is if I might have said this in the previous interview, I don't remember, but two pastimes that everybody has about any subject, especially older people, about any subject, they have two things that they love doing: complaining and bragging. Okay,
Right.
Those are the two pastimes, and you want to listen to that. You want to listen to them complain, and you want to listen to them brag. Usually, bragging means, I got a great deal. The guy gave me a great deal. I'm really happy with my program. This is great. I shopped around, and I want to listen to that. Okay, why? Because now we're in rapport. I'm listening to him say how great of a deal he got. Well, you got a great deal by what? Doing research and talking to a guy, an expert. Okay. And then, well, that's how you got a great deal the first time. So the odds are that could happen again, don't you think? And they go, yeah, it could happen again. Okay, great. So I'm just the next guy.
Right.
I'm just the next expert that they're talking to. If they have a tale of woe, it's now you and them against that villain.
Right.
See, that's the bad guy. See, and it's kind of tricky, because you don't want to say, well, that's, unfortunately the insurance industry is, those kind of characters are, everywhere. You don't want to say that. This is a bad apple that is very rare.
Right.
Occasionally they make it through the process, the vetting process, to become an agent. Occasionally they do that, or maybe they're desperate. Maybe these people are desperate or something. The agent is, maybe he just needed the money for something, and unfortunately that can turn people bad. And I'm very sorry that he's in my business, and I always make it worse than they say it is.
Right.
Say whatever it is that they're saying, I make it worse. I always over apologize and over dramatize, so that this is what they'll happen after they tell you your tale of woe, and you're, oh, I'm with you. I don't know how this guy did what? Oh, I don't know if I could have, handled it as well as you. And I do that, and eventually, when I say eventually, I'm talking about 10 or 15 minutes, I'm not talking about hours. They'll say, well, it really wasn't that bad. And you don't, it wasn't that bad. And now they're starting to go the other way. See, and they vented. See, right. I want them to vent, because once they're venting, like if a guy is arguing with you, if you get into an argument with another guy, him yelling and screaming, that's the end of, that's as far as it's going to go, is almost always is him yelling and screaming, because that's how he vents, is yelling and screaming.
Right.
The guy you don't want is the guy that doesn't yell and scream, the guy that's standing there calmly, because he's holding it in.
Yeah.
And you don't know what he's going to do.
That's right.
It's like the lion that roars isn't the one they don't roar before they attack.
That's right.
So you want to let this guy, the steam out of this guy. You want to let this guy, the steam is building up. You want to let that steam go. And the way you do that is by listening to his tale of woe. So anyway, that's that.
Do you have any sort of like key sales words or hot button words that you use that you think would be workable in any kind of sales environment? Is there anything that you say that really tie into really focusing and listening and
yeah, a few things a few words I like to say that just from experience, just from doing it forever and ever and ever and ever, that I've fallen into these things, and I've found out that these make a dramatic impact in how you sell. The word popular, if you can work the word popular into your presentation, see, what does that mean? Popular means that lots of other people have chosen this, which and they're not doing this consciously. These prospects aren't thinking all this stuff consciously, but their brains are processing this in this way. What's popular, that means that everybody else is doing it, which means it must be a good thing. I should do it too. Probably that's what my friends are doing. See, that's why when you're selling a referral, that's why it's so powerful, is because there's proof that other people are buying. See, there's proof that secondary proof that it's a good thing. So when you say it's popular, that carries with it a lot of weight of, society now says it's a good thing. Oh, okay, it's a good thing. It's probably something I should do. And recommend, the way you should say recommend. May I make a recommendation? Okay. The reason you want to say recommend is this. Who recommends stuff?
Experts.
Professionals. Doctors, lawyers, dentists. They recommend things to you. See, people that are very knowledgeable, they make a recommendation. See, so you want to recommend to them. May I make a recommendation? Okay, and then you can also say, can I give you my opinion? But with the word opinion, I like to ask their opinion. Can I get your opinion on this? Oh my gosh, if you say that to somebody that, again, like I said, maybe maybe for their entire life, nobody's asked them to their opinion. See, this is their moment to shine.
Right.
And they're so excited you're the guy, and the reciprocity sets in. If you do that for them, make them feel good. Now they've got to make you, this is all unconscious. They're not thinking about this, but now they've got to return the favor, and how do they return the favor? Well, they don't know how to return the favor other than just buying. See, they don't know the psychology of returning the favor and saying nice things to you. They don't know that, but it sure makes them want to buy from you. See, by asking their opinion, it makes them open to what you're saying. Okay. And I like to say, the word demand, not I demand you do this. That's not how I mean it. It's in high demand. High demand means like popular.
Right.
See, and also never say anything bad about a previous buying decision or a competitor. Never say anything bad about a competitor, because if you do, even though you don't think you're doing this, in their minds, you're downgrading your entire industry. Like if they say, well, the last three, if you ask them about, the last person that they bought from, so yeah, and they say something bad about the guy. Oh yeah, there's a lot of companies like that, and now they're just, and you start saying bad things about companies, and they're thinking, well, the industry is rife with these people,
It's worse than
like
we
politics.
thought.
It's worse than we thought. I certainly shouldn't deal with you, so you don't want to say anything bad about a competitor at all. I never do. And never, ever, ever saying bad about a previous buying decision, because now you're insulting them. See, even if they say something bad about their own previous buying decision, even if and it is, sometimes they'll say, look, I shouldn't have bought this. I didn't know any better. I was dumb, Now, it sounds like you should go, well, yeah, but no, no matter how you have to do it, I'll say, like, if somebody says, well, I shouldn't have bought that, that was a really stupid thing to do, I'd say, you know what, based on the information that the guy gave you, I think I would have bought it. I think almost anybody would have, based on what you knew at the time, based on what the guy told you. I would have done it. It's just unfortunate that, you learned more later. And so what I'll do is I'll make sure enough, everything you need to know, so that you'll be, feel good about, choosing something today, choosing a program today, if you decide to.
So one thing I wanted to make sure we cover here is a lot of course, new salespeople run into problems with objections. They hear these objections, and it puts their momentum at a complete stop. And one of the things you and I discussed were some of the more common, or should we say more difficult, objections to overcome.
Sure.
So the one I believe that I myself and my agents have difficulty dealing with when we're selling a senior a life insurance product is the objection, I need to talk to my kids before making a decision.
Sure.
This is, again, probably the toughest way, or the toughest objection to work with. What are your thoughts on how we can dismantle this and still sell on the first call?
Well, I have something that works a lot. Okay, you have to change their perspective slightly. You have to reposition what you're doing and what you're selling. And what when they say they want to talk to their kids, the reason they say they want to talk to their kids is because they're afraid of making a bad decision, or they're afraid of what their kids are going to say. So you have to know that that's what's happening in their mind. They're afraid of what their kids are going to say, and they're afraid of making a bad decision. And so I have a thing that I say, okay? I say, this is a gift from you to them. This is not for you. This is for them. And your children love you and will tell you that they don't need this help from you. They're going to tell you that. And a good son or daughter will tell you that tell their parent not to help with the final expenses. And a good parent will help them anyway, and they're never going to forget. So you change it from you have to talk to the kids to we already know what the kids are going to say. The kids are going to say, you shouldn't do this. Well, why are the kids saying that? Because they love you. And they don't want you to go to the expense to help them out. Okay? That's what a good child does. That's what a good kid does. Okay, but what a good parent does, a good parent takes care of this problem anyway. Because they don't want the kids to have to take care of it. See? You've come, and if after that, if you say that, you might have to repeat it a little bit. Because there's a lot in this.
Right.
Okay,
yeah.
There's a lot in this. This is a gift from you to them. Your children love you and will tell you that they don't need this help from you. Because this is help from you. Here's why, let me go through this. Because it's a gift from you to them. I changed it from you're buying insurance to it's a gift to them. Which it is. Nobody buys insurance for themselves, life insurance for themselves. Nobody. They're not going to be here.
It's a gift.
They buy it for somebody else. Yeah, and you do it for people you love. So it's a gift from you to them. See? And everybody has that experience. What should I get you for Christmas? Oh, just don't spend any money. And, oh, please don't do that. My mother-in-law, we used to ask her, what do you want for Christmas? And it was always like, oh, she's got like 6 kids and we all put the money together. Oh, get me a spatula. I've always wanted a good spatula. Like we're going to pool our money and buy her a spatula. And I said one year, I said, why don't we do this? Why don't we get her like a sofa or something like that and a spatula? And we'll give her the spatula first. But anyway, so it's a gift from you to them. Your children love you and will tell you that they don't need this help from you. See, you've handled that now because they know that their kids are going to say that, or at least they're afraid their kids are going to say that. You're telling them their kids are going to say that. So you've essentially taken that objection away. And then a good son or daughter will tell their parent not to help with the final expenses. See? Because that's what they're going to say. And it is what they're going to say. And a good parent will help them anyway. And they'll never forget it. And, you say that and, what you've done is you've twisted their entire point of view as to what they're doing here. They're, now it's not, should I buy something? It's, should I help my kids?
Right.
It's not should I buy something, it's should I help my kids? See? And that if they don't say yes to that, now it might, again, because they're older, and I always memorize these things. If it's a couple of good sentences, I'll memorize it. So I always say it the same way every time because I don't want to forget something. There's components. I think there's 2 or 3 sentences, 4 sentences maybe. There's components to all of that. Every sentence builds on the previous one, right. And you really should say the whole thing. But if if one of them didn't quite hear it, say it again, and say it sincerely, and say it. I hate to say this. Some of this is acting, and so I might kind of lean forward a little bit, and just look at them, and maybe lower my voice just slightly, like I'm almost telling them a secret. See. Or I'm going to tell them something in confidence, or something that's very important, and that's how I'll say it. And then when I'm done with that, they'll do one of 2 things. They'll go, "Wow, I guess that is what I'm doing." Oh, okay. They'll either say that, or they'll come up with another objection. And if they come up with another objection, probably that's the end. Probably that's the end.
Right.
See, because what I just said was a pretty big gun there. That was a big bullet.
Oh yeah, no, that's huge. And let's talk about the most other common objection that we hear.
Sure.
we need to think about it, or let me think about it. Let me
Sure.
pray about it. We'll hear the stuff kind of all
Jesus.
is the same thing. How do you deal with that?
If they say I don't get it. I want to pray about it very often, but I mean, I have an answer to that, and you might hang up on me when I tell you what that is. When they say they need to think about it, I don't want to ask them. Every book says this. Well, what do you want to think about it? Is it do you have to, because you get that out of all the books. Do you want to think about this, or do you have to think about,
right.
This benefit or that benefit? Oh, so it's the money. Okay, so you need to think about the money. What is it about the money you have to think about? And you're doing that. You're doing that technique. See, when they say they want to think about it, here's almost certain. You already know this. It's almost certainly a reality. The reason that they're saying that, it's just automatic. It's like, hi, how are you? It's just automatic. They say that to everybody. They've said that to the last 35 salesmen. They didn't give them each individually a different objection. I don't want to buy this car because I don't like the suspension. They said, we're going to think about it. Why? It's one of two things. Mostly, it's either that they really don't want to buy it. It's just a polite way of them maintaining rapport. That's why they say what they want to think about it instead of no. They say they want to think about it. It's a way of maintaining rapport. See, either they really just don't want it, or they haven't bought. Everybody, remember I said we were talking about the buying process?
Right.
See, everybody has their own timetable for that. Now that I'm not talking about weeks or months. I'm talking about if you're there for half an hour, sometimes it just hasn't soaked in yet that they're going to buy. It's just they're not quite ready. See, maybe it takes another 15 minutes of just talking to them, until they get more comfortable, and then they'll say okay. And that's what I found. So when they say I want to think about it, I want to be very open with that, and I just say this. I go, oh. I just say oh, and here's why. Because when I go oh, in the way I say it is like oh, like it's almost like you're the first person that's ever said that to me. And that's how they interpret it. They're interpreting it like, wow, maybe I shouldn't have said I want to think about it. Maybe most people don't say that. Maybe it's, that's unusual. I don't want to be unusual. I want to be like everybody else. Maybe I should just buy from this guy because it's like, oh, okay. But now you're putting it on them. They have to come up with a reason why they have to think about it. And most people aren't really good at that, coming up with reasons why they have to think about it. So they'll just kind of give general things like, oh yes, it's something that we're probably very interested in. We are very interested in, aren't we, Martha? Yes, we're very interested in it. It's just something that we like to talk about it and mill it around, and we just like to, before we decide. And then I might say, I understand that completely. I said, you should have all the facts. One of the things earlier when we were talking, you brought up a good point. Earlier when we were talking about this one feature, you said you like that. Tell me more about that. What would that do for you? And you want them, I just want to go back to, I'm not talking to them now. I just want to go back to the presentation now and reiterate something that they liked, and then have them talk about that. And then I'll just pretend like they didn't say they wanted to think about it. I'll just close normally again. See? And I'll do that maybe 2 or 3 times. And then I have the greatest the greatest answer to every objection. I have that. Would you like to hear that?
Yeah, definitely. Go for it.
Okay. Okay. The greatest answer to every objection. And in the book, I just state it outright. But the truth is, I might wait 2 or 3 or 4 objections in, because this is a powerhouse. This is either going to make it or break it. And maybe I don't want to do that in 2 minutes. Maybe I want to try 3 or 4 other things before I do this. But this makes it or breaks it. Okay. And this works perfectly with insurance, because I used it with insurance. Okay, John, if there's any reason you would hesitate, you shouldn't do this. And maybe this isn't for you. In my business, I only want happy clients. I only want to work with people that are sure that this is for them. The client who is so excited, they can't wait to get this, or they can't wait to get started. Sometimes I'll say that. My question is that you?
Yeah.
I say that. In other words, I only want to work with people that are so excited, they can't wait to get started. is that you?
So is this your kind of like ultimatum? If they say no to
Kind
this,
of.
you're packing up and leaving, or are you going to start to combat?
No, it's not. They won't say no. They don't say no. Okay. Almost never do they say no. It's not a yes or no question. And it doesn't. A lot of times they don't say yes. It's not where they just say yes. That's not really what happens. What happens at that is that creates a fork in the road.
Right.
And they start going, either it turns them in the direction of, I'm going to buy from you. They start rationalizing buying. You know the questions. You know the way that people talk. They'll just start saying things that indicate that they're in the process of buying. See, they're starting to talk positively about the program. They're starting to talk about, previously, that they're glad they didn't buy from this other guy and they're glad they're talking to you now. They'll start saying positive things. Well, we've been thinking about getting something like this. We really do need to do something. They're doing that. They're starting to go in that direction. See, or they'll start going in the other direction. But you just want to know what direction they're going in.
Right.
See, you want to know what, and this question will put them, occasionally you'll get a guy that goes, yeah, I guess I'm that guy. Yeah, I'm that guy. I really do want this. Occasionally you'll get that, but not usually. Usually you'll get something like, well, I know what you're saying. Yeah, we really are interested. Don't get me wrong, Claude, we really are interested in this. Tell me more about that other, that one feature in the program. Tell me more about that. Okay, now what they're doing now is they're slowly buying. I've done is I've tripped them, and that they're going to fall to the left or they're going to fall to the right. And I want them to fall to the left, but even more important than that, I want to know which way they're going.
Right.
See,
right.
I want to know what they're thinking, because I don't want to be there for another 3 hours.
Right.
See, I want to know which way they're going, and that's what that does. It puts them in a frame of mind, and it pushes them in one direction or another direction.
So back to some of the unpacking some of this objections
Sure.
handling. You originally stated when they give you an objection, now correct me if I'm wrong,
yeah,
that there's a percentage of the time, so most of the time you don't have them or you can't have them. Can you quantify that? Is that after the first?
What do you mean?
Like, let's say I need to think about it, and then you rebuttal it, and then
that's what I do. I just say, like that, and they'll start telling me a story, a little bit. And so the reason I want to hear that story is I want them to get more comfortable, because a lot of times, maybe most of the time, the reason that they're hesitating is because they're just not comfortable with saying yes quite yet. It's like when you're on a date, and I'll say kiss. I'll just use that as a metaphor. You're on a date with a girl, and you want, at the end of the date, you want to be kissed. Okay. Well, it might be an hour into the date where she's like, oh, let's kiss. It might be, well, I'm uncomfortable with that. Let's wait until after dinner and the movie and, the other stuff, and sitting home watching TV and having a drink or whatever they're doing. Okay. And now I'm comfortable. See, now I can justify buying, is basically what that is. See, so you might have to, you just want to, a lot of people just aren't quite, they're letting it soak. They're letting the idea that they're buying soak in. Mm-hmm. See, a lot of objections is that, unless it's an objection that's a concrete objection. Like, I had somebody say to me once, we would buy this, but my wife has terminal cancer and she's got about a week to live, and we've just got other priorities right now.
Right.
And that was the end.
Right.
What do? You just say, okay. About the preying on it. See, when I was selling insurance, I got that because you're talking about, life and death and the future and money for the future and all that. And everybody's got their own religious, beliefs or non-religious beliefs or whatever. I did this once, and I'm not recommending this. Okay. I'm not recommending this, but I was selling a vacuum cleaner, and it's one of the few times I got the thing about preying on it. Mm-hmm. I was selling a vacuum cleaner, and there was a young couple, and they said, that we're going to have to prey on it. And I said, I understand completely. I said, in fact, earlier today, before I went out to sell, I prayed, and I just said, I need a sale. Who should I go see? that really needs this. And you know what? Of all the places I could have gone, I came here. Of all the people I could have talked to, I talked to you. Of all the days I could have, all the times I could have been here, I found today was the right day. Don't you think somebody's trying to tell us something? Now, I did that, and I have to tell you, I felt so bad on the way home, because of course they just said, yes, of course. And, and I've told it to other salespeople, and they go, that was masterful, because it handled the objection completely, and it completely flipped it on its ear, and now you can, now they have to buy it. I felt bad. I almost called him and told him, look, don't do this, because I feel like I took advantage of them. I really did feel like I took advantage of them, but I mean, they bought the vacuum cleaner and they were happy and everything was fine and all that. But, I don't really have an answer for that. When they say they want to pray on it.
Actually do what you said. Wake up every morning, pray that you'll find someone to sell a policy to, and then you can tell that in sincerity, right?
That's exactly right. The difference was this. I was not being sincere.
Right, exactly.
But if you can do that and be sincere, absolutely. Like one of the most powerful things you can say to somebody is this: if you were my own brother, I would tell you this.
Ah, right.
Okay. Now I am slightly uncomfortable saying that because it's not something that it's not the way that I think. It's like that would be slightly uncomfortable for me. But I've heard it from salespeople that are phenomenally successful, and when they say that to a customer, they are 100% sincere. They are 100% sincere that that's true. But I'm always afraid when I say something like that, if I say something that's slightly out of my personality, right, I'm afraid that I might come off as, it'd be incongruous. It'd be maybe insincere. It'd sound insincere, and I just don't. I'm not a great actor, is what I'm saying.
So it's more of a personal objection to saying that. It's not necessarily a bad idea. If it works for you, great. But you personally.
Oh no, it's not a bad idea. It's not a bad idea.
Right.
It's that when I was doing the thing about the praying thing, I was being insincere.
Right.
Okay. I was doing it strictly as a technique to work. See, I was doing it strictly as a technique to work, and I shouldn't have done that. And I felt bad about it too. I did. I felt bad about it. But I never did it again. I mean, but if you're of the mind that you feel, if that's sincere to you and you feel that way, that is the answer to the objection.
Right. That is.
And you already know that.
So how many times should you attempt to actually close? We talked about going back after saying I need to think about it and revisiting the presentation, giving them some value, remind them of the benefits and features. How many times do you do before it's? This is
one of the most valuable things you can teach your guys. Mm-hmm. And it's extremely advanced. It's very, very advanced. I don't think I came up with this or this occurred to me until I was selling for 25 or 30 years. It took a long time. When I'm answering objections, see, I'll continue answering objections and talking to them because what happens is this: they start doing one of two things. They're always going to do one of two things. They're going to start coming closer to buying, closer to you. Okay, meaning closer to you as an individual, closer to your person, they're going to start agreeing with you more. They're going to start being more friendly. They're going to start being more positive. They're going to start doing that, or they're going to start pulling away from you emotionally. They'll start saying things that are not quite as positive as they were. Now, as long as it doesn't matter the speed that they're doing this, as long as they're coming towards me, I'll continue. Okay. As long as they're coming towards me, doesn't matter if it's slow. Doesn't matter if it's kind of in a circular path, or as long as I can tell that they're slowly coming around to the idea of buying, I'll continue. But once I see that they're pulling away, and one of the most obvious ways that you can see that is they'll start, they'll do this. They'll say, we always like to think about it and talk about it, and we don't like to decide, right then. We like to, talk about, well, I'll answer that objection the best way that I can. And then I'll talk about, what was one of the main features that you liked in your, when you were, when I was talking about the program. And they'll talk about that. And then I'll say, okay, well, does that sound okay to you? And they'll go, well, like I said before. Oh, like I said before, you know what that is? Now he's breaking rapport is what he's doing. And once they start breaking rapport, that's the end of it. I've never in my entire life been able to, once somebody starts pulling away from you, there's momentum in that pulling away. When they're coming towards you, there's momentum when they're coming towards you. See?
So when
the
they
longer you let them come towards you, the
position of objection, that's kind of a fortification.
Say it again?
In my mind, I see that they're digging in. They're
right. They're starting to dig in.
Yeah.
Once they start digging in, that's the end of it. They're not going to turn around. See, they're not going to turn around. It's like a girl that you want to date. You can get her interested, but once she's interested and then not interested anymore,
right?
You can't get her interested again. She's already gone through that process, and the customer's already gone through the process of gaining rapport with you, and now they're losing rapport. They're not going to come back. So that's when I would let it go, when I recognize that they're not going to come back.
Kind of follow-up question to that, Claude. Do you ever experience where you begin to pull them towards you, but then they begin to, lack of a better word, like deviate? Like if you can imagine, instead of just a momentum towards, it's like a zigzag, like they go back and forth between.
Sure. I'll let them do that. It's not a straight line. It's like this. When I'm selling, it's like I'm on a grade, and let's say I'm like on a putting green. Well, that putting green is sloping just a few degrees sloping towards that ball, or towards that hole in the center of the green. Okay. And they can be going on circles, and they can be, going back and forth, and they can change direction. But as long as they're not going away from that hole, I'm okay. See, because I know where I'm going. I know where this conversation is going to go. See, and one of the ways that you can do that, if they start going off on like a tangent, which especially with older people, that's going to happen a lot. You already know that because you've been doing this forever.
Yeah,
they're gonna. There's listening, and then there's them just after they've told you the fourth story about their cat. Okay. Then what I want to do is I don't want to say, I don't want to hear any more stories about your cat. I want to incorporate it as part of the conversation. It's going to sound like I'm still interested. It's just part of the conversation. And I'll say something like, earlier you brought up a really good point. And then you'll start talking about the good point that they brought up. You said something earlier that I've been thinking about. And then you start talking about this other thing. And to them, that's just part of the conversation. See,
right?
That's a normal part of a conversation. They don't know you've redirected them.
Right.
They just see that as part of a conversation, because now you're talking about them. See, they're talking about their medication, and you've heard about their medication for half an hour, and that reminds me of something you said earlier. You were talking about da. And to them, that means, oh, he was really paying attention to something that I was talking about earlier.
That's true. Right.
That's how you, and as long as they're getting closer, now, if they just keep going off, some people just, they just like they like to have visitors, and eventually you'll figure that out.
Right.
There are those people, and, if they're not coming any closer and they keep changing the subject away from what you're talking about selling, if they keep doing that over and over and over again, eventually you realize with me, it's about an hour. So I'll just sort of pack up, and I'll say, well, thank you for taking your time, and it was a pleasure meeting you. And, I'll just do that.
So one thing we need to discuss is, after you close these deals, obviously there is the chance that some of them will have buyer's remorse. Mm-hmm. What do you do to prevent cancellations?
Well,
and then also, what is the number one reason why people cancel too?
I know what the number one reason they cancel for me is. Okay, they either talk to somebody else, or they find out something they don't like. See, or they perceive something they don't like. Maybe what they find out is not true, but there's something that they find out that they don't like. So With us, it's almost always when I'm showing them a vacuum cleaner and they buy the vacuum. When I was doing it in the home, especially, they'd buy the vacuum cleaner. After I left, they would do one of two things. They would either talk to their parents or their kids or their neighbors or something like that, and the guy would say, "You spent what on what?" You know. Or what would happen is they would not be able to figure it out how to use it. And with when you're selling a policy, I'm guessing that there's several features of that policy that when you leave, because you don't leave the policy, is that right?
No, we just write the application up.
You write the application.
Right.
So what happens is when you left, they're going, what was that again? We get what and we do what and how does, and then one of them will bring up a question. I don't think it handles that. Oh my gosh, what did we do? You know, so what I always do, when I'm in a home and when I'm here at the store, I'll take time and go over everything that they did, everything that they agreed to, everything I agreed to. Here's everything you get. Here's everything that, we agreed to. And so they feel comfortable about it. And maybe when I was in the home, I'd take maybe 15 minutes. In fact, let me tell you real quick. There was a guy that was working for me. He was a great salesman. He would sell certainly half of the people he showed a vacuum cleaner to, they would buy. He was a good salesman. And then about 90% of those people would call the next day and cancel.
Wow.
In fact, his name was Roger, and we called him Next Day Cancellation Roger because people canceled all the time. And I would ask him questions because I was the distributor that had hired him and trained him. And I'd ask him questions. And, what happened? He'd tell me everything that happened. And I'd say, okay. And so finally I decided I'm going to go with you on a presentation and you're going to do the presentation. Oh, okay. So we do the presentation and they buy. As soon as they sign the agreement, he goes, well, thank you very much. Here's your instruction booklet. It tells you how to do everything. Here's a DVD that tells you how to do everything. See you guys, thank you. And I said, wait. And he was fighting me on this. He didn't want me to do this. He wanted to go home. I said, no. Let me take a few minutes and show them, a few things on this machine, how to do this. Let me show them what they're getting here. See? Well, why did I want them to be comfortable with that? I want them to be comfortable with the idea that we've done business. I want them to be comfortable with what they've decided on. See, so when I leave, what have they got? They understand what they have. There's not going to be any doubts. They're happy. You could call it a cooling off period if you want. Some people that do this don't really want to talk about the product. They just want to talk about, tell me about your kids again or something like that. Well, you can do that, but I also, in that mix, I also like to go over what they bought. Do you have any questions about this? No. Okay. Here's what this means. And here's what this means. And, and I like to give them, spend about 10, 15 minutes with them and let them know exactly what they have so they feel confident about what they bought. See,
it's funny.
I like to do that.
It's funny you mention that because where you see that a lot of is in the self-assembly products. So if you buy toys or cribs, we're having our fourth kid here in about a month. And the first thing you notice out of the packaging, I see it more now in the last couple of years than 5-10 years ago. There's this big flyer that screams at you, call us if you have any problems with anything. Don't contact Amazon. Call us.
Right.
We'll help. They literally beg you because obviously I would imagine a big reason why people refund that stuff is because they get frustrated and they don't want to deal with it. It's too hard. It's too complicated. So in the same mold is that cool down experience, especially on a product like an actual product that you have to operate and learn how to do. It's extremely valuable for retention.
Yeah, I actually had a guy once call me to cancel, and I went out to pick up the machine, and I said, "Okay, I'm ticking it up. I mean, this is you canceled. This is perfectly okay." I said, "But I gotta ask." I said, "I want to be better at what I'm doing here. What is it that caused you? What triggered this?" And I can't believe he actually said this. He goes, "I couldn't figure out how to turn it on." And I said,
"Never
"You turn it on here."
Underestimate your clients or overestimate them.
Yeah. Well, they see it's you're the expert. That's the other thing. See, we're the expert.
That's true.
And we think that everything is obvious.
Right.
See, everything about insurance is so obvious. You talk about cash value, they should know what that means. No, they don't know what that means. They don't know the concept. See, they don't know that a lot of the concepts of insurance, they're just like, they don't understand, like they give you $5 and if they die, they get, 1,000. They don't understand that.
Right.
How does that work? How do insurance companies, how do they do that? Why do they pay these claims? You see on TV that, you can get term insurance for young people, term insurance for $30 a month, and it's $500,000 of insurance. That's impossible. It's like magic.
Right.
See, you want them to understand what they're getting, and you want them to be real comfortable with that, and you want them to be real comfortable with you. See, now if there's a problem, this is when for example, it's the opposite of when I was. It's the opposite of you. You mostly talk to older people. When I was in people's homes, it would mostly be younger people in their 30s, mostly.
Sure.
And if they were in their 20s, let's say, and they would, maybe the objection he brought up is, maybe we should ask our parents, say, because they're so young, and maybe it's the first major purchase. I might be the first guy that ever came in their home and sold them something.
Right. Definitely. And
they say, well, what about, maybe you should talk to my parents. Well, let's say I overcome that. And then at the end, when I'm showing them how to use it, I might say, okay, I have a question for you. When your parents ask about this, what are you going to say? Oh, well, we're going to say that, we decided and we really wanted it, and that's it. I go, okay, I just want to make sure. See, I want them to hear each other say that. I want them to reiterate, that we've handled that problem, so it probably won't come up again.
Sure. Right.
See, if there's a problem, like they have to, like, for example, they said, well, we would want to talk to our kids, and you've handled that problem. Before you leave, you want to maybe reiterate that it's a gift for, what happens, what are you going to say when your kids say, you should never have done this for us?
Right.
What are you going to tell them?
Yeah.
Coach them. That's right. You want to coach them as to what to say. Partly because you want to coach them as to what to say, but partly you want to instill that feeling again that it's you're helping your kids. Your kids are going to say, don't do that. And you know why? They're going to say that because they don't want you to put yourself out for them. But that's what a good parent does. A good parent puts themselves out for their kids. See?
Right.
I mean, who can argue with that?
That's true.
And I can say that sincerely because I really believe that sincerely.
Right.
See? I can say that. The praying, God sent me here today.
That on the other hand.
Maybe, huh?
That rebuttal on the other hand, not so much.
Well, it's because I'm not a super religious person,
right.
But if you are, or if you have those feelings, then absolutely, however you're sincere, however, whatever you can say that you can be sincere while you're saying it, sure.
So as we wrap up here, Claude, how can listeners listening to this find out more about yourself as well as your book, One Call Closing?
Well, I actually have 2 books that your listeners, I have 6 books out. 2 of those books would be valuable to them. They should just go on Amazon and get, I'm sure you'll provide a link, to one of them is One Call Closing. How to find, highly likely people that'll, or how to close in the first call, on the first sales call, at One Call Closing on Amazon, and also sales prospecting. So I have those 2 books, and those 2 books cover most of the selling process. Prospecting goes all the way up to now you're presenting, and One Call Closing goes from presenting to, closing, and covers a lot more than what we did. In fact, a lot of what I just talked about here is not really in the book. Some of it is extra, because I can't put everything in the book because eventually it'll be 800 pages. I just can't do that. So I have to, what story do I want to put in there that makes one point? I don't want to put, I've told you some more advanced stuff. That's the thing, when you have a book, you have to make it accessible for everybody. Right. And what I've said is a couple of more insurance specific statements or answers to objections or phrases or whatever, which I can't do in a book. So, but if you get the books, you'll have a really good understanding, 99% understanding of of how I learned how to sell and what I know about selling. The other books are on local online marketing, and one on, your first 90 days of selling. And if you have a customer, if you have somebody that's just started out in selling, maybe that would be helpful to them. I think it's called Selling Essentials, your first 90 days in selling. You can get these for $3 on Amazon, in Kindle, or maybe $10, for the paperback, but they're on Amazon, certainly.
So what's the next book? What are you writing?
The next book, my friends laugh when I tell them this. I say the next book is on rapport,
oh, really?
The meaning of, it's on rapport. I've got 3 books that are in various stages of completion. The one that's probably the most completed is on rapport. And the reason that my friends laugh, is because I'm more of a, they know me more as a jokey kind of direct. I'm a very direct person in my normal life. And when I say rapport, they start laughing because they're saying, we never have felt rapport with you ever,
Ouch.
Because you're, no, they're joke. They're my friends. These are, we're always saying, things. It's almost like a joke, that, it's like, what's your next book on? You're a football player, and my book is on, selecting kittens, or something like that. It's just out of character. But rapport is very important, and I talk about it in the books, but there's more to it. See, so that book is going to go in more depth as far as establishing rapport. I've learned a lot, frankly, doing a lot of research after I wrote the books I've already got. I learned more about rapport and how important it is, and more techniques about maintaining rapport and keeping rapport. A few of those things we've already talked about, but there's more to it, of course.
Well, Claude, I want to thank you so much for joining me. And like Claude said, you'll see the links to the books as well as Claude's website in the description box below. Mm-hmm. Other than that, Claude, thank you so much for joining. I certainly learned a lot myself here, and I'm going to change some of my rebuttals there and see if I personally can start closing more. But again, I really appreciate your time setting aside to do this interview.
Sure. Thank you, David. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, we'll see you next time, Claude. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.